The Toronto Blue Jays travel south of the border tonight to take on your Minnesota Twins, and Kalshi can take your viewing experience to the next level by using code FANARCHBASEBALL. You can get $10 when you trade 10, so shout out to Kalshi for sponsoring today's episode. But what's going on, Twins fans, and welcome back to another episode of Twins Latest. I'm Sam Calder. Hope you were all doing well. I'm not, because the Twins lost a tough one yesterday, which we will get to here in a matter of moments. But just a few quick reminders before we do. We are on the road to 500 subscribers, so if you are not already subscribed to the channel, please do me a huge favor and do so for daily Twins news and updates. Please be sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. A 5-star review would help tremendously. And drop any questions for me in the comments. We've got our first viewer/listener questions segment today, so stick around for that. But with all that out of the way, let's dive into the episode. The Twins had an afternoon series finale yesterday against the Seattle Mariners, with the winner clinching a series victory. And as I alluded to in the intro, that would be the Mariners. The Twins lost by a score of 5-3, and it was nearly the exact same story as Tuesday. Taj Bradley had one of his best starts of the season, which says a lot because he's had quite a few good ones. He allowed just 2 runs over 7 very strong innings, 4 hits and 2 walks, along with 7 strikeouts. He had an insanely high amount of whiffs at 18 and pitches thrown at 114. I cannot think of a time, or the last time I should say, that I remember seeing a pitcher throw that many pitches in a single game. 8 of those whiffs came on a splitter, and he had at least 3 on all 4 of his pitches. Great to see him bounce back after what was a pretty tough start last weekend in Tampa Bay. The Twins offense pounded out 12 hits, but obviously had just the 3 runs to show for it. Trevor Larnach, Ryan Jeffers, Cody Clemens, who is suddenly red hot at the plate, and Brooks Lee all had multi-hit days. Josh Bell and Matt Wallner were the only starters that did not record a hit. And spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about Matt Wallner in our listener questions segment here coming up. But as a team, they were 3 for 12 with runners in scoring position, which is not bad. But they could have really used a hit on a couple of those at-bats that came in the bottom of the 8th. Victor Caratini pinch hit for Wallner in the 8th and drove in James Outman from second to give the Twins a 3-2 lead. A Brooks Lee single and a Royce Lewis walk then loaded the bases with 2 outs for Byron Buxton, who flew out sharply to left. And that proved to be a pretty crucial out for the Mariners because the Twins bullpen once again collapsed. Eric Orsi came in for a save opportunity in the 9th. And long story short, it did not go well. He allowed 3 runs on 2 hits and 2 walks while recording just a singular out. And fairly tough timing after I noted on Monday that he was the reliever I was the most confident in from this bullpen. Although to his credit, the hit that got Seattle on the board was a little 66-mile-per-hour dribbler up the middle with the infield in. So not really his fault on that one, but it was his fault that those runners were on to begin with. But another tough loss for our Twins, which is beginning to feel like a pretty common theme at this point. And after being 11-7 and atop the American League at one point just a few weeks ago, they now find themselves at 13-18 and 4th in the AL Central, even behind the White Sox, which is pretty tough to do. The good news is that they will start a new series today with a chance to start fresh, and we will touch on that game here in a few minutes. But right now, I want to do a bit of a deep dive into Connor Prelip's first couple of Major League starts. It's been a long time coming for him, from a potential first overall draft pick to multiple significant arm injuries. His path to the majors has been all but linear, but at long last, he made it. And his first couple of starts with the Twins have been really encouraging, I think. He's thrown 9 combined innings and allowed 4 runs on 5 hits and 3 walks, while striking out 11 batters. And he's done so against 2 pretty good teams. The Mets and the Mariners both have very talented lineups, and Prelip held his own, at the very least, in both starts. While the 4 earned runs wouldn't necessarily lead you to believe he's been super sharp, I would argue that doesn't necessarily reflect how well he's pitched. He's allowing less than a base runner per inning on average, and while it's probably not worth investing too much into his expected ERA and FIP after just 9 innings of work, they're both far lower than his actual ERA, right around 2. And his stuff has been absolutely disgusting. His breaking balls in particular, which I have talked about quite a bit, have been especially stinky, and he's leaned extremely heavily on that slider. He's throwing it 47% of the time through his first 2 starts, which you usually don't see from a starter. That's not uncommon for a reliever, but for a starter, that's a lot of sliders. But Connor Prelip's slider is not your average major league slider. In addition, we've seen a bit of that new curveball he added over the winter, and good lord, he is throwing it only 7% of the time. I think that's a number that's going to need to come up substantially. It has a 66.7% whiff rate, and it is generating nearly 3,300 RPMs of spin. That is comfortably in the elite category. I think a big reason why he's allowed just the 5 hits so far is that he's getting ahead of hitters. A 72% first pitch strike rate is absolutely fantastic, and it makes things a lot easier as a pitcher, especially a young pitcher, to keep hitters off balance and guessing while they're behind in the count. And that, I think, is what has allowed his breaking balls to be so effective out of the zone, because he hasn't really been pounding strikes over the plate, but when you're ahead in so many counts, hitters are naturally going to be more aggressive. There are some things that Prelip will need to get cleaned up, though. When hitters do put the ball in play, they're hitting it very hard, and they're hitting it very hard in the air. Eventually, that's going to lead to some bad things. It hasn't yet, but unless you're getting, a ton of infield pop-ups, a 27% ground ball rate, which is where Prelip's mark is at, usually is not a recipe for success. Additionally, and maybe I'm the only one who feels this way, I know I've talked about this in recent episodes, I want to see him throw his breaking balls a little bit less. And as filthy as they are, the only reason for that is health related. For a guy with Prelip's history of arm injuries, throwing your slider and curveball 55% of the time is certainly going to be taxing on his elbow. But like I said yesterday, if he stays healthy, then I don't care. That's all that matters. There is a lot to be pleased with from Connor Prelip's first couple of major league starts, and it will be interesting to see what happens when Mick Abel does return from the IL, because as of right now, I would say that Prelip deserves a spot in the Twins rotation from what we've seen so far over a guy like perhaps Simeon Woods Richardson, which that can be a conversation for another episode. But I think that's going to be definitely something to monitor once he gets back. But folks, in case you didn't know, baseball season is here, and now you can trade every single game on Kalshi. The Twins are trading at 46% probability to win the series opener against Toronto tonight, meaning a $100 trade pays out $209 if they win. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10, Kalshi, Kalshi, trade on anything. But speaking of tonight's game, let's talk about it. We have the series opener of a 4-game series as the Blue Jays travel south. Bailey Ober will be taking the mound for your Twins, looking to build on some very solid last few starts. And opposite Ober will be Kevin Gausman for Toronto, who, in case you forgot, was the pitcher Royce Lewis homered off of twice in Game 1 of the 2023 wildcard at Target Field. Hopefully, history repeats itself there. I've talked a lot about how it's hard to succeed as a starting pitcher with 3 or fewer pitches unless you have absolutely overpowering velocity and or very sharp movement. And as loyal fan of the channel, Steve Speakeasy, noted in the comments the other day, Gausman kind of defies that. He has been extremely successful with just really 2 pitches. His four seam and splitter make up 94% of his total arsenal, and he mixes in a slider that lasts 6%. On the year, Gausman sporting a very impressive 2.57 ERA over 35 innings with 38 strikeouts to just 6 walks, and neither his fastball or splitter have that overpowering velocity or movement. He sits just about 94 miles per hour with that fastball, and a splitter is a good pitch. It's not great by any means in terms of movement, but it's got a 10 mile per hour speed gap from his fastball, and it looks just like that fastball coming out of his hand, which is very evident when you look at the advanced numbers. He's got a 93rd percentile chase rate, the majority of which coming on that splitter, and he is getting an insane amount of whiffs on it, I believe 39%, if I'm remembering correctly. He is going to pound the zone. I mentioned just the 6 walks so far this year. His walk rate is just above 4%, which is pretty incredible. So Gausman is going to challenge the Twins, and I think if you are the Twins, you've got to be sitting at the top of the zone until you get 2 strikes. You know he wants to get that splitter down and out of the zone, so make him move off of it. Force him to throw you a fastball and I think and hope good things will come as a result of that. I talked a lot about Bailey Ober and how he's been so effective this season in Tuesday's episode, so I encourage you to check that out if you have not already. But this is a Blue Jays offense that has kind of struggled to start the year. They obviously have a bunch of talented hitters, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. most notably, but they've been hitting a lot of balls on the ground. So I think if Ober can work that changeup down and mix in his breaking balls effectively, he could have a really nice night. I think the Twins get it done in the season opener, in the series opener. I think Kevin Gausman is due for a blow-up start. I'm going to say the Twins win by a score of 7-4 to start the series on a strong note. And my bold-ish prediction for tonight is that we get the third straight quality start from Bailey Ober. I think he matches up well with this Toronto lineup, and I'm seeing 7 innings out of him, which surely will not come back to bite me, but that is what my gut is telling me. And then let's wrap up the episode with our first ever viewer question segment. I've mentioned I want to start doing these more, ideally like once a week, so please drop some questions for me in the comments that you would like me to see me touch on in a future episode. Our first question today comes from Karen Murdoch 1826, who wants to know what I think about the catcher situation. And there were a few different parts of her question, so I will briefly touch on all of them. The first part was, does Ryan Jeffers call a good game? It's a little tough, I think, to tell, as a spectator, but I think he does. And I think it helps that he is very familiar with this Twins pitching staff because he's been catching Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, and Simeon Woods Richardson for years at this point now. And even this year with Taj Bradley and Mick Abel, who he's not as familiar with, they've both made huge strides. And I think it's because Jeffers knows what works for each guy and what doesn't, depending on the situation. We've also seen him be extremely effective with the new ABS challenge system. And I actually talked a couple weeks ago about how I hope the Twins give him a contract extension since he's set to be a free agent after this season. But to answer the first part of your question, yes, I do think Jeffers calls a good game. The next part was, is Victor Caratini really a catcher or is he more of a first baseman? I think his skill set, both offensively and defensively, works more as a catcher. He's a very good blocker behind the plate, and he's also been very sharp with the ABS challenge system like Jeffers. He plays a good first base though too, but I think offensively is especially where he profiles more as a catcher. You kind of need to hit for power to be a true first baseman, and that's not really Caratini's thing. He's going to put the ball in play, and he's a good hitter, don't get me wrong, but he's more of a hit for contact guy, which is much better suited as a catcher. And then the last part was, who else is there in the Twins catcher room? Alex Jackson is a name to know for 2026. He is the starting catcher for AAA St. Paul and kind of by default the number 3 catcher in the organization. So if something were to happen to Jeffers or Caratini, he'd be the guy most likely to replace them. I shouldn't say that with 100% certainty, but if I had to guess, it would be Alex Jackson. As far as the big picture, Eduardo Tait, hopefully, is the guy long-term. He's the number 4 prospect in the Twins organization and one of the best catching prospects in the entire league. He's still a few years away, though. He's only 19. But there are a couple other guys that could turn into something as well. Kadeem Zhao and Enrique Jimenez, all 3 of which are names to know. But yeah, I hope I answered everything. And thank you very much for your question, Karen. Up next, we've got friend of the show, Mr. Isaac Heilman, who wants to know, what's next for Matt Wallner? AAA, he can't keep getting away with this, end quote. As Jesse Pinkman once said, a little Breaking Bad reference, which, if you haven't seen it, great show. I highly recommend. But as far as the question goes, I think, unfortunately, AAA is just the most likely outcome. He does not look confident at the plate, and I think a reset is probably what's best for both him and the team at this point. And look, if you're going to keep a left-handed hitting, power-hitting outfielder that's going to strike out a lot on the roster, just call up Emmanuel Rodriguez. I mean, let's get him some major league reps and get his feet wet in the majors. But I think at this point, yes, AAA is probably the most likely situation, as unfortunate as that is. But thank you for your question, Isaac. And our last question today comes from Steve Speakeasy, who wants to know if Walker Jenkins is overrated. And I fully understand where that question is coming from. It has not been an exceptional start by any means to the year for him. But in my opinion, I think it's a little too early to say that just yet. I don't think his stats accurately reflect what he's done this season. He is hitting just .213 as of Wednesday night, but he's hitting the ball hard and drawing a ton of walks. the hard contact has just been in the form of a lot of grounders. And over the last couple of weeks, that's started to turn around. The extra base power is starting to show up. He's walking more than he's striking out, and he's always had good speed on the bases. He has been perfect in the outfield so far as well. So I would say it's a little too early to say he's overrated. But by all means, I mean, if he's hitting 210 by the end of May, I think we could certainly have that conversation. But thank you guys so much for your questions, and please keep them coming. Like I said, I want to do a segment like this once a week, ideally. So drop those questions in the comments for me for next week. But that is going to do it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button for more Twins content every single day. But until next time, I'm Sam Caller, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace.